Alrighty, you are here for another episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. You are here with Dr. Fantasy, and as always, my co-host, the Fantasy Caveman. We are rolling through here our prospect profile series. Today we are going to be talking about Usman Garuba from Spain, 6'8", 230 pounds. 7'3" wingspan. He is only 19 years old. The only reason I wanted to mention that is because he looks like a grown man in these videos, and he looked older to me, so I had to look up his age because I just normally you don't see 19-year-olds with his size. But um, over in the Spanish league, 5.8 points, 5.4 rebounds, 45.4% from the field, 34.8% from three, and a very respectable 72% from the free throw line. Caveman, do you have an interesting fun fact on Mr. Garuba?
Oh man, I'm gonna do a bone. I'm gonna give two actually.
Two? Oh my gosh, now I'm excited. I thought it would be hard to find something on him.
Oh no, you know I have abilities. So you mentioned the fact that he's grown, that he looks like a grown man. So when he was 12 years old, he was 6'2" and weighed
God.
180 pounds.
Oh my God.
At 12, okay, that's that he was a big boy. Uh, and then the other one, not as there's the video just showed up for
Oh yeah, it's been rolling.
me. So you mentioned and then back in 2019, he became the youngest starter ever for Real Madrid at only 17 years old.
Interesting.
So that's pretty impressive, and I would say.
Yeah.
So going into some of his strengths here, I think the biggest thing with him is that he gives great effort on the defensive end of the court. And that is something that lacks sometimes uh with a lot of young prospects, is they don't always show the best effort. I mean, there can be good defenders, but there's not a bunch of guys that always give a ton of effort all the time, and he's one of those guys that gives great effort on the defensive end of the floor. And then another thing, he has very good. I think he has very high uh awareness. He knows about the right play to make. Like, he knows when to go for a block. He knows when to try to steal the ball. He just overall knows, and we're gonna know that and I'm sure you'd agree with this. Most of his strengths lie on the defensive end of the court. And that's the thing. You saw with his averages, that you kind of think that would be the case. Uh, but yeah, and then he's also very solid. The one offensive strength I think that he has is that he's very good in the pick and roll game. I think he knows when to cut, and that when it comes to the pick and roll, and we mentioned that with a lot. I mentioned that with a lot of guys. The pick and roll is so prevalent in today's NBA that you have a very good chance to last a while if you know how to play in the pick and roll.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think he's one of those guys we're going to talk about. I mean, it's not surprising to anybody that I'm a big fan of his. I think he'll
Oh,
have a
I'm
nice
shocked.
long. I know it is
I'm
very
shocked.
shocking, but I think he's going to have a nice long career, and I'm excited to see what he does. But you kind of mentioned a lot of what I would say. He has a crazy high motor. I mean, I feel like he's going 200%. And I watched more than just his highlights too. I saw him when he wasn't as at his best. And I mean, I swear though, the one constant, he's going 100%
Yeah.
100% of the time. And I think that's something that's really hard to teach. And I love that attitude and effort. And I think that's just a winning attitude that really anybody, when I've talked about guys like Jay Crowder, I used to be a big fan of Damari Carroll, who's still hanging around. I think they just have
He
like
exists
winning
still.
attitude. I think he's hanging around still, but he barely. But I love the guys that are just gritty and play tough, and I think that's the kind of guy that he is. And he's very fundamental. And I think when you talk, that's kind of the theme that I saw, and you mentioned too. He's just a very fundamental, high IQ player. He's in the right spot at the right time. He's not the most athletic player. He can defend the perimeter. He has, I mentioned, a 7'3" wingspan, and he's got great strength too. When you're 230, you can defend guys in the paint as well. So he's got a good mix of size and length. I think he's going to be able to defend multiple positions. He's a very offensively, that's kind of the theme. He's not a great shooter. He's not a bad shooter. He's fundamental. He's in the right spot. He knows what he's doing. And I think there's a role for players like that. So, I kind of mentioned it a little bit with the weaknesses then. He's not the strongest shooter. He's not a shot creator. That's not the kind of player he is. And that's the kind of ability or lack of that's going to limit his potential. But this is a guy to me that is a perfect pick for those borderline playoff teams that are trying to find guys that'll make a difference defensively for them. That'll, he'll do the little things that lead to championships.
Yep.
Even when we talk about a guy like PJ Tucker, and even though he only has one good game per postseason, he's still a gritty, hard-nosed player that has a championship mentality, and that's what I think Garuba is going to be long term. He does make some mistakes with the ball. He turns it over a little bit, which is a little surprising considering his IQ. Some of the turnovers he made were pretty bad, and it just surprises me because he was in the right spot. He did everything right, but there was just one bad pass, and that happens a little too much right now, which, it's going to be tough to rectify that at the next level. And that's one of those things that concerns you a little bit because he's been playing at a professional level. I think that's important to note. So he's been playing with a high level of competition, but I mean, the NBA is
Yep.
another level. So if he can't adjust to the speed and, if guys are able to anticipate his passing lanes, that definitely is going to be a concern. And just overall, he's not an aggressive player with that athleticism and size. I feel like he should be going to the basket more, but I see him settling for a lot of mid-range jumpers, and I think he's got to use his size and length to get to the basket more, but that's just not what he does right now.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on a lot of his weaknesses with my big, and like you mentioned, I think uh his control and ball security, especially like down in the paint and in traffic, is very questionable. And at the next level, that paint, you got one or two shooters on the perimeter, and then everybody else is in the paint. So he's really gonna have to improve his decision making and what he does with the ball when he gets it down in the paint because that his as it currently stands, that's not gonna fly that well at the next level. And with his shoot, I see he's a guy where sure his shooting his lack of shooting or offensive game is going to hinder him or limit his upside, but I don't think he needs to really have much of an offensive game to be a really good player at the next level. Uh, I just think he needs to work on his decision making, and his footwork is a bit sloppy at times. You won't see it with the highlights, but if you watch some more film, his footwork could use some work. But yeah, I think he's one of the safest picks, and I mentioned this before we went on. I think he has one of the safest floors in this draft class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would agree with that. And ideal fits, let's talk about that. I had two for him. The first one, I mean, I really like, and you'll probably agree with it, but it's the Wizards. We talked about them
Oh,
needing
I'm
some
shocked.
I know, it's very shocking. They need
A defensive big going to the
a
Wizards.
defensive big going to the Wizards. But how the Wizards are constructed right now, I think a pick like that makes a lot of sense, especially if Westbrook and Beal are still there. They're set offensively. They have that ability, but they really have no size and length, and they could really use it. So I think that's really the ideal fit for him. I also had Houston in there as well. Houston has Kelly Olynyk and Christian Wood right now, but beyond that, they really have nobody, and they're kind of starting from the beginning. And not to mention, they just need players at this point. I mean, they don't have a lot of guys that can contribute immediately. So I think that he could do that for, because he's the kind of guy, we haven't really mentioned that, but I think from day one he's going to be able to contribute somewhere. Is he going to be the rookie of the year? No, but he's going to play 15 or so minutes right from the very beginning. I think he has that ability. No, and like I said, he's played in a professional league already, so he has good experience. I think he's going to be very. So those are the two I had: the Wizards and Houston, and I think he would have a pretty. And Houston has 2 picks in the 20s, so that's right in the range where he may be available.
Yeah, I had the Wizards down as well, unsurprisingly. A team that you've already mentioned previously with one of the bigs we've already covered, that's Golden State.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have Wiseman there, but there's for some reason, and you alluded to it when we did our NBA live recently. For some reason, the Warriors don't seem to be sold on James Wiseman being a part of their long-term future, which I don't know where that's coming from, but it is a rumor that a lot of people have heard. Now, I think Garuba can step in. I think he's the perfect player to play alongside Draymond in the front court. With the shooters that Golden State has, I think he could kind of be a defensive anchor for them. This is mainly going off the fact that if the Warriors decide to move on from James Wiseman, I don't entirely know what that's about, but even without him behind James Wiseman, the Warriors don't have like Eric Pascal, who
he's not a big, yeah.
Yeah, he's more of like a.
They have Kevon Looney. That's about it.
Come on, but and Garuba can step in and easily beat out Kevon Looney. Not saying Kevon Looney sucks, but Garuba has a lot more potential than him. So I think he could step in with Golden State, be a defensive anchor. The other team is another team that you already mentioned previously. That's Oklahoma City. Just the Thunder just need players that can play. They've been trading everybody away. They have Al Horford now, I guess. No, they had Al Horford.
No, he's gone. I know it's hard to keep track of who's on the roster.
It's hard to keep track of who. They had Al Horford. But they just and the Moses Brown. That's the guy I was thinking of that they got rid of.
They shipped off. Yep.
But yeah, I think he could step in and be a defensive anchor for them at that 5 spot. I think Garuba's a guy where I think he needs to go to a situation where he can be the defensive force that he is. I don't think he needs any much polishing on that end to be a contributor right away. He just needs to go to a situation where he can just work on his offensive game behind the scenes, and that seems to be the case with Oklahoma City. Everybody's going to be able to work on their offensive game behind the scenes because nobody on their team that has a good offensive game aside from Shai. There's nobody that's really an offensive.
What about Kemba? Kemba's there today.
Kemba is not going to be there. We both know it. We both know this is not a Chris Paul situation, okay?
Okay, fine.
I very highly suspect he's going to be dealt. A lot of rumblings about Kawhi to the Lakers, but that maybe is a discussion for another time. But
Yep.
yeah, Thunder I see as a potential fit as well.
So you mentioned it before. Speaking of Draymond, that's one of my NBA
Oh,
comparisons. Now, offensively, that was the first. Well, there's actually one name that came to mind immediately, but I'll end with that one. I think defensively and with the effort and intensity, I think Garuba and Draymond Green are pretty comparable. Now, Draymond Green's a better distributor and a better playmaker, so it's not a perfect comparison, but I think defensively and just their overall attitude, I really like that comparison. On another lower end too, a guy that people like roll their eyes at, but Boris Diaw back in the day, he played with the Suns and
yeah.
towards the end of his career with the Spurs. I loved Boris Diaw, and he was a very effective. He was a pretty decent playmaker as well, but he was a great defender. He played, I just they're very similar to me. I don't. It's hard to describe unless you've seen Boris Diaw, but their offensive games are similar. Diaw maybe once again a little more of a playmaker, but both fundamental players, great rotational pieces, and I think Garuba will have a long career like that. And then last, to me, I mean he's baby Paul Millsap. I mean he legitimately even his jump shot looks exactly like Paul Millsap's. The form to me is kind of uncanny how similar it is, but I think that you're going to be talking about a Paul Millsap kind of career with Garuba. And Millsap, I don't believe he ever made an all-star team. There's a few years where maybe you could have said, okay, he's arguably or close to being an all-star, but for the most part, he was just a very solid starter and more of a rotational piece on some good teams. And I think that Paul Millsap is a really nice comparison for what he could be.
Yeah, Paul Millsap's a guy I had down as well. Kind of in a different direction though. I think he has a higher floor than this, but let's say it doesn't entirely pan out. I think a guy like Bismack Biyombo,
Okay.
if and people like I've heard this comparison. A lot of people don't like it because they think Garuba has a lot more potential, especially on the offensive end. But Biyombo's been a very solid in between starter and bench big for a while now, it seems like. He does all the things that don't always show up on the box score.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that which is why I'm upset at myself that I didn't think of the Draymond comparison. I didn't have him down. I should have because Draymond does a lot of things that don't show up on the box score. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the type of player that Garuba can be. And then on the higher end, and you mentioned this guy in a previous one, but I see shades of Bam Adebayo in him. Especially on the defensive end. Now, Bam Adebayo is 3-point game quite isn't there, just like Garuba, but Bam Adebayo is beginning to at least trying to show some confidence in taking some jump shots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Garuba has that potential because, like you said, his stroke is just like Paul Millsap. And it took Paul Millsap a little while, I'd say, to really be comfortable shooting some jump shots. But yeah, I could see. I think that's a higher end comparison for him. Uh, and Paul Millsap, I was curious when you said that he's actually made 4 All-Star teams.
Did he? Wow.
Yeah, he has 4 All-Star appearances. And he made all defensive team.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
just a lot.
surprising because, I mean, looking at his stats throughout his career, he's averaged 17, 18 points a few times in his career, but I'm surprised he's made 4, but good for him. He deserves that kind of recognition. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, to me, when I watch him, I was like, am I watching like baby Paul Millsap here? I mean, that's literally the first thing that I thought of. So I think that's all for this episode then. I am pretty high on Garuba and think he'll have a nice long career. One of my
I
favorite
think he has a
prospects
pretty safe floor.
that I've gotten to see. And then another guy that we're both very high on is coming up next. So make sure you tune into the next episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. We'll see you then.